statistician. I'm a researcher at Climate Rates International.
My name is Mira Rubio, and I am the coordinator for the California Trade Justice Coalition.
Hi, my name is Ileana Paul. I'm the Deputy Director of Sierra Club's Industrial Transformation Campaign.
My name is Maurice Carney. I'm one of the co-founders of Friends of the Congo.
My name is Marianne Comfort. I work for the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas.
I wanted to firstly ask you, what are critical minerals and why are they so crucial for the clean energy transition?
So these include minerals like cobalt, nickel, lithium, copper, and they're used in a variety of renewable energy transition. So from renewable energies to, building solar panels and windmills to, building the transmission lines needed to get energy from point A to point B, and to, build things like batteries that we need to harness electricity. So really, without, these raw materials, they're, a necessary piece in building out the actual infrastructure we need to decarbonize from fossil fuels.
Critical minerals agreements, also known as CMAs, are targeted trade agreements that seek to strengthen critical mineral supply chains. So depending upon how they're written, critical minerals agreements can help countries meet shared climate, job creation, and sustainable development goals, or they can end up accelerating exploitative models of resource extraction that are harmful to workers, communities, and the environment.
So nickel is, a mineral used in electric vehicle batteries as well as for some other purposes. And Indonesia is the world's largest producer. Last year, it produced over 50% of the world's nickel, and its market share is increasing. Local community members told us that their land had been taken by companies without their consent. In some cases, people's land had been destroyed by companies, leaving them with no option but to sell. They were no longer able to harvest food off their land once all those trees were cut. In some cases, members of the police or military came and intimidated people into selling their land. So for example, we had one person tell us that, the police would come to his door repeatedly at 2 a.m. to demand why he hadn't sold his land to a nickel company. In addition to, issues around land, one of the things that we've heard quite a bit around nickel is the impact on people's traditional livelihoods. So people who are traditionally sustain themselves and their families through farming or fishing are no longer able to do so because of either loss of their land or degradation of the natural environment. So both, nickel mining, nickel processing is really harmful in the environment if, proper protections are not taken.
One of the coordinators of miners, you have collectives that range in the tens of thousands of diggers, cobalt, copper diggers. We're just talking with him, and he held up this rock, and you can see the different layers and colors. And he said in this rock there are up to 7 different minerals you can find: manganese and copper and cobalt and tin and zinc, malachite. You just name it. And that's the sense. It gives you the sense of the spectacular wealth that is there. Or if you go on one of the main roads where the minerals are being shipped out, you can travel for up to 30 kilometers and you'll see trucks, just lines of trucks of minerals going out of the country. At the same time, with all of that spectacular wealth laying there under the ground, as you go into the communities, and you find that lack of access to water, potable water, clean water, lack of access to electricity, lack of access to basic internet. So you see the disparity between the tremendous wealth and then the living conditions, social conditions of people.
So we happen to have sisters in Argentina, and we hear from them often about the communities that are being harmed by lithium, which, in case you don't know how lithium is extracted there, is by evaporation. So these are very dry areas, and so any process that uses tons of water is very detrimental to diverting the water from the communities and from their livelihoods into this process of extracting the lithium. So that's a big concern. We know of lots of cases of environmental and land defenders who have been killed for resisting projects of all different kinds of mining, including for the energy transition.
Throughout international law, this is a standard practice that Indigenous peoples have the right to exercise free, prior, informed consent. So the right to get information, to decide whether or not to go it, and ultimately to say yes or no. Out of we interviewed about 4 dozen people impacted by nickel mining in Indonesia. Most of those people self-identified as Indigenous, which people have the right to self-determination. Not a single person we interviewed was able to exercise that right to free, prior, informed consent. So broadly, across the world, something like 54% of all critical minerals mining projects are located on Indigenous peoples' lands. So Indigenous peoples are disproportionately impacted by these projects. And that being said, they're not necessarily the ones who are benefiting from the minerals that are coming out of that ground.
They're still living in hell, right? They're not the primary beneficiaries. They are getting crumbs. If you take into consideration what the finished product is like. In fact, they complain and say, well, we produce these, this is where the minerals come from for the smartphones, the batteries in the smartphones. And we can't afford smartphones. We don't have a smartphone. So they are keenly aware they're not benefiting, and they, for all intents and purposes, living in poverty, extreme poverty, as well, in spite of the tremendous wealth that's around them. As these minerals are coming out, right, we find, according to the World Bank, up to 70 million or so Congolese live on less than $2.15 a day. Of 110 million population, in a country where economists say that there's $24 trillion worth of natural resources.
If trade rules are weak, they'll make it easier for big corporations to come in, extract minerals from one country with no restraint, ship them to another where they can be processed with essentially no regard to labor rights or wages, and then they can send the products back to the US for consumption. And that's essentially how that system exists right now. And there are so many opportunities along every step of this process that are just ripe for exploitation if we don't have the proper safeguards in place. And all we're saying is it doesn't have to be this way.
The only way that I know how to do it is to mandate it through government policies and regulations, because I don't think we can count on companies just doing it out of the goodwill. Maybe some companies would, but we can't count on that. We have to mandate it.
Any proposed critical minerals agreement, in order to be successful, needs to do 3 things. So firstly is prioritize, reduce, reuse, and recycling in the critical minerals supply chain instead of just new mining operations alone. 2, needs to create good-paying jobs in the value chain industries in both the United States and the regions in which critical minerals are being extracted or recovered. And 3rd, it needs to establish strong, binding standards on labor rights, the environment, indigenous rights, and community consent all throughout the supply chain. And it needs to be backed up by swift and certain enforcement mechanisms that will hold the companies accountable.
So circularity is basically reducing the use of virgin resources by transforming the cradle-to-grave cycle, where a once-used material ends up in landfills or incinerators, with basically a cradle-to-cradle cycle, where the same molecules show up again and again in both reused and newly made goods. So it's like amped up recycling. That's kind of a minimizing what circularity is, but I think for most people, that's what we can attach it to in our day-to-day. For critical minerals in particular, prioritizing circularity means that there's less lithium mining, less nickel mining, less cobalt mining, but still plenty of EV batteries, solar panels, and more.
Better equipment, implementation of policies that the government have in place, that they regulations and policies that they believe can benefit them. Formalization of the mining sector. They seek support in terms of investment or loans. They believe that they can help them. Materials, protect them as they dig, and then just overall information.
Strong labor standards are needed to ensure that workers all along the supply chain have good paying jobs, safe jobs where they're free from harassment, and that they can organize with the unions of their choosing. Meanwhile, strong environmental standards are needed to protect the surrounding community's air, water, and biodiversity. So
those of us who are privileged in the global north, ought to be mobilizing to assure that human rights standards are met, labor standards are met, environmental standards are met in a way that would reflect what we demand in our backyards here in the United States, for example.
We can't let corporations whose only priority is shareholder value or the politicians whose pockets they line dictate how we power our homes and our businesses, how we make essential goods, and how we connect with and manage our lands and our water. So for critical minerals, it means that communities located in mining areas not only directly benefit from the mineral resource extraction, but they also get to shape what the extraction looks like. It means that workers building EV batteries are making family-supporting wages in stable union jobs. It means that once a battery has reached the end of its useful life, the individual components are extracted and made into new products. In order to get there, I think it's really essential that up and down the supply chain, there's a respect for human rights, for labor rights, for the integrity of our environment. The pessimist in me thinks that this will be a big undertaking, especially in the current political environment. So I think that civil society has to play a really big role in making sure there's transparency and accountability, both of companies and of our governments. Our governments are here to represent us. They're supposed to be working in our favor, and it's really up to the people to kind of hold feet to the fire if we need to. But I do think that we need a really radically different path forward than the path that we've used to date for all sorts of resource extraction and in particular sort of the things that are traded around the world.
Even though thousands of miles away, say, what's happening in the Congo matters to me. What's happening in the Congo, I'm going to dedicate myself to assure that it's not normalized. Whether it's the tech workers in the UK that's formed a working group, or the workers in the semiconductor and chips industry in Silicon Valley who formed a working group around the Congo, saying that we have to do something. We cannot normalize this condition. The organizing on the ground, the solidarity outside of the Congo, even our having this exchange right now where I'm sharing with you our experiences in working with folks on the ground. That gives me a tremendous amount of hope.